The Fifth Element came out in 1997. It's been a while, and it had Bruce Willis in it in his heyday. He was a very popular actor. It's a science fiction movie. It's fun, it's original, and you may or may not have seen it, but if you haven't, or if you have, you should rewatch it. And we're going to go over 3 reasons today why you should watch the Fifth Element. I've got author Sophia Hansen with me. She's got a new book coming out, and we're going to have this discussion. But before you get to the video, remember to go into the description and click on the links there for Sophia and a free ebook there that I've got for you. And remember to like and follow and share and subscribe and all that fun stuff for the channel. All right? Peace. Well, welcome back to Great Stories Change the World, the YouTube channel where an author like me, and sometimes 2 authors like I have with me today, go over movies, stories, books, TV shows, those kind of things, and talk about why they are great stories, or maybe why they're not, because we believe that stories have power and have meaning, and so we want to make sure that we tell the best stories that we can. And so today I have with me a fellow author, Sophia. How you doing, Sophia?
Hi, thanks for having me, Britt.
No problem. Now, Sophia just released a book like 2 days ago. It was Tuesday, what was that? January
Thanks.
the 9th. Book was just released, and tell us the name of the book really quickly.
Waters break.
Waters Break. Now, this is available on Amazon. There'll be a link in the description. We'll go over it a little bit at the end. All right. So if you're curious more about it, but it's a great book. It's really doing well. It's got #1 already on something, right? A couple things.
It's placing really well in the Christian's young adult teen science fiction and the traditional science fiction with aliens. So
Oh, okay, got it.
always
Nice.
on the top 20 of that category.
That's cool, but that's a big category, so that's good.
It
Like
is.
getting into the top 10 or 20 is great. So I wanted to get Sophia on here for us to talk about a movie or something within the genre that we both love, which is usually fantasy science fiction, mostly science fiction, I think, that we have in common. And so Sophia picked what movie? What movie did you pick?
The Fifth Element.
All right, and why did you pick it?
Oh, it's one of our family favorites. For one thing, we've been watching and rewatching it since the 90s. We always pull it out when we want to test a new sound system because the soundtrack is amazing. My husband's a musician, so that matters. Um, and we just love it. And every time I watch and rewatch that movie, I am blown away at the good writing. It's just phenomenal. And it always makes me just go, I can't believe they did that. And I've seen it a billion times. So I
Right.
should believe it.
Good. All right, so we're going to go over 3 different reasons today about why you picked this movie, why people should watch it if they haven't seen it. It's old enough that there might be some people who haven't even seen this movie, and it wasn't one of the biggest movies of its day. It was kind of popular, but there are probably a lot more people who haven't seen it nowadays because it's 20 something old years old, and but as we talked about earlier, before we started recording, it really does hold up. It really does hold up, and we're going to talk about 3 reasons why, as writers, as people who are interested in story, you should go back and check this out either again if you already have, or if you've never seen it. So the first reason that you told me was the excellent writing. So talk about the writing. You've already kind of mentioned it, but what are some examples of just amazing writing in this story?
I think it's a master class in writing, whether it's screen or written word. Um, One of the theories that I learned, or what do they call it? Skills I learned about writing was the concept of Chekhov's gun, and I had no idea what people were talking about. But the idea is you don't have a gun on the stage unless you're going to use it. If you just have it there, it's like a promise you make to your audience, and if you don't use it, they're going to be frustrated and let down. It's like, why did they even have that gun there? Um, Fifth Element, it does the opposite. Every single thing they have in there, whether it seems innocuous or huge, is used later, and I love it. One example is they start off in an archaeology dig, probably in the 50s, um, and the archaeologist keeps yelling at the little old boy who's holding a reflector, Aziz, light. He keeps saying that over and over, and it's kind of funny. The kid falls asleep. He leans it back, and the light is obscured. And so he yells at him and yells at him. And then the aliens start landing, of course. and he does one final, Aziz, light. And then they turn on their base lights and just floods the whole cavern. It's like, oh, that's better. And all the other kids are just blown away at that. But it's just a funny little point where he has a funny thing in there, but he makes it part of the plot, an important part of the plot. Then at the very end, that concept, that shining of light, becomes very important in the final scenes. Another example was cigarettes and matches. In the beginning, they move forward about 300 years or so, and we are introduced to Corbin Dallas, who's played by Bruce Willis. Love him. And it's the future, and so everybody's like, today's the day you should stop smoking. He's like, yeah, when my life gets better or whatever. And he pulls out a cigarette, and the filter is about that long, and the tobacco part is about the size of our filters. And it's just, you think, oh, that's comical. Okay, they're taking care of their people. They're a nanny state. But he looks for his matches and he shakes it, and you can hear there's something in his matchbox. He pulls it out, and they show something that doesn't seem important, but they show him taking out a match, but there's still one left. He puts it away in his pocket. You don't think about it after that until the final scene where Ruby Rod, who's played by Chris Tucker, his crazy character, he's like, Corbin Dallas, I have no fire. I don't smoke anymore. I stopped smoking. I wouldn't have stopped if I knew. And they're trying to save the world, and they don't have a match. And then Bruce Willis, of course, he pulls out his matches and he lights the thing. He shakes it the same way he did in the first scene, lights it, and they save the world eventually. But it was just a beautiful scene of, he had a gag. It revealed something of the world, but you don't see that it was actually planted there to add to the satisfaction the audience feels at the very end. It's like, that was brilliant. It just makes you think, brilliant. And then there was one more scene that I just picked up this last time where there's a race that's sent to save the Earth, and they get attacked by agents of the enemy, and they ask if there were any survivors, and there's only one survivor. We talk about it. And the survivor is actually this gauntlet that has a little bit of living tissue left. And so they recreate this fifth element from that little bit of tissue. And then later on, and that, I'm not going to spoil it too much. If you haven't seen it, it's been out since the 70s. I mean, the 90s. But if you haven't seen it, you should see it. And I don't want to spoil too much. But that character drops into Bruce Willis's cab, and he says, are there any survivors? And so they bring that concept of there's only one survivor, and they bring that concept forward to their meeting. Any survivors back there? And they just make it seamless, but they remind you that she's a survivor. She's a survivor, and her role is to help the Earth survive. So it's just, once again, brilliant. It makes me just crow every time I catch something I hadn't catched earlier.
Yeah, and so going back to that scene with Corbin, with Bruce Willis, and the whole smoking thing, it doesn't take a ton of time.
Mm-mm.
But I think one point I'll make along with what you're saying, not only do they bring it back, but it's something that I've noticed about good writing is that scene has several different purposes. In other words, there's a show don't tell element where it's telling me more about the character of Corbin Burnson. It's telling me more about or showing me more, right? It's the show don't tell sort of thing. It's showing me who he is. He's holding on to smoking. He's holding on to this sort of very ancient sort of barbarism that people wish he would get rid of, but he's still kind of holding on to some things, and all of these things are stated just visually and with the attitude, and yet that's not all that's going on in the scene. There's it's also setting up, like you're saying, it's setting up a callback later for I don't have fire and all that stuff. It's so I think a lot of times, we have to think about as writers when we craft a scene that complexity and those layers actually, even if people don't realize that's what we're doing, it makes it more interesting and more engaging for the reader and the viewer, because there's a lot of stuff going on that we may not consciously pick up, but when we're consistent about that and kind of give those layers, and I agree, those are some great sort of callbacks and different parts of that writing. So that's the writing, and again, we could go into a lot of that, but a good part of writing, especially in a screenplay, but also in a novel, is dialogue. So much of what happens is dialogue. So and that shows us a lot too, what people say, how they react to one another, and interact. So talk a little bit more about the dialogue. So that's your number two. Number two is dialogue. So talk about some maybe examples of great dialogue.
Ooh, I'm going to have a hard time with the dialogue. I'm going to do my best though. Um, well, I talked about the survivor, talked about the light. What I loved about the dialogue actually is it's always a setup. It seems like every time they state something, one character states something, and another character will respond. They follow it with a scene. They'll say, never happens, and then it happens. Or, I mean, they just state ridiculous things. Um, and and then they show it in a way that completely takes you off guard. And that's what I love. It's nothing is expected, but I think it's Stephen James that says for good twists, it needs to be both inevitable and unexpected.
Right. Good.
What follows what they say is usually inevitable if you look back at it, but you totally don't expect it. And I'm really trying hard to come up with an example, but my brain isn't working that well right now.
No.
I got
Well,
the Aziz light. I got the perfect. I got the cigarettes.
well,
Um,
one of the things about the dialogue, and this is going to go into our number three as well, is every character also has a voice and a perspective, and
oh,
and that's so important with dialogue. When you get into dialogue, of course, Bruce Willis, he's kind of doing his same diehard sort of attitude guy that he does in several action movies. He's just doing it in a science fiction one this time. But Chris Tucker is a different character and flamboyant, and then what's her name, the Fifth Element girl?
Milla Jovovich,
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the actress's name, but she's
Lilu.
yeah, she has her own sort of accent and her own sort of way of speaking, and then the monk guy, and I mean there's just so many different people, and then the antagonist, played by what's his name, not now
Gary
my
Oldman.
yeah,
Lord,
Gary Oldman, who is
oh, he's
who is
excellent.
he's like one of the best actors ever, like, so he may not be underrated, but he's one of the best actors ever because he's played so many different sort of characters, from heroes to villains and everything in between, but they all have their own style, they all have their own voice, and that some of that is the written dialogue because of the way it's written. Different people talk different ways. So and I agree that the dialogue within it is really interesting because in some movies it's like everybody talks the same. You ever notice that? Like everyone is verbose or everyone is just talks short or but when you mix it up, it helps to give a little variety, I think.
Yeah. What I love especially is Lilu's arc. She comes from being completely unfamiliar with everything. She doesn't speak the language. She doesn't know where she is. All she knows is she's got a mission and she can't even communicate. Um, and I just love, there's this, grumpy general that tries to assert dominance. This is, you're going to have to work on your communication skills if you want to get out of there. And so she looks at him, she draws back, and he's gotten assurances from the scientists that it's unbreakable. See, that's one cute. Like, she can't get through this. It's unbreakable. Okay, so then he taunts her. He taunts Happy Fun Ball, and he shakes his thing. If you want to get out, it's got the key on it. You're gonna have to work on your communication skills. So she draws back, and she just punches through the unbreakable um, glass-looking cover, grabs the key, pulls him, knocks him out, and lets herself out. It's like unbreakable. She breaks it. Communication skills, she gets out. Um, it's just so fun how they set up everything and then they blow it away. The concept of perfect, Corbin in the very beginning of the movie talks about he's just looking for the perfect girl, perfect woman. And the scientists that put her together say, oh, this process is perfect. And then when they reveal her, everybody's astounded because she's also beautiful. And they're like, yeah, perfect. And she is referred to as perfect throughout the film. And that was set up with, that's what Bruce was looking for. That's what he ended up with.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's transition into your third one. Your third point is the characters. And we've already kind of talked about characters because great writing, great dialogue, a great story is always about character,
Yes.
and that's something that unfortunately I think we're starting to miss a lot in modern storytelling. People can come up with a great gimmick or a great idea, but man, you really have to develop characters to because there's a lot of great world building in the Fifth Element. I think the world building in the Fifth Element is astounding, and the whole story setup of the aliens and all the stuff that's happening, but it's really the characters that end up driving this story. So what are some of the things about the characters that you think are amazing?
I think what blows me away is that all of the characters are very believable, even though they're all exaggerated over the top for whatever category they are. They they all seem ill-suited until they fall into their places, and they, like I said, they're completely believable. When we meet Bruce Willis's character Corbin Dallas, he's basically living a self-destructive lifestyle.
Right.
He is obviously depressed. He's got a cat. Nothing against cat owners, but he's like that's the only thing in his life that he has a relationship with. Um, he takes care of himself as far as you try to rob him, you're going to be sorry, but um, he doesn't care that much about himself, and he doesn't try to get out of that hovel that is his life in the beginning. And the arc he goes through, and it's believable. You hear from his boss and from his military commanders about why he can do these things. And he's like, whatever. And he doesn't actually engage with the mission he's been given until he realizes that Lilu is at risk and he's fallen hard from her because she's perfect. Lilu starts out as a character who's a blank slate. She's completely unaware of how she's supposed to communicate, but she knows she has to save the world. And I love how quickly you watch her taking in information, and she always surprises you with what she's realized she can do and learn. Um, so she's amazing, and when she first speaks English, her phrase is "please help," and she reads it on the back of Corbin's cab. Please,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just she makes such an impassionate plea, and he ignores her like 3 times. I'll get back to tri-fails. He ignores her like 3 times. And then finally, the police cruiser is hooked up to his cab and they're sending somebody over. And he's like, oh, my boss is going to kill me. And he just whips off and he saves the girl, or he thinks he's saving the girl. He is. Um, and that's the first time. Well, that's actually a self destructive choice. He knows he's risking his job, his livelihood, and trouble with the law, and he does it for the girl, but he does it for a positive reason, as opposed to a "I don't care what happens to me" reason. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's when you see the first shift in his outlook. And that just grows over time and until he declares whatever he has to declare to save the world. um, so I love his shift. Another awesome character was priest Vito Cornelius, or Cornelius, as Leela would say it. And she
Right.
always says the names with an accent, which she's very consistent with her accent. I love Mila. Um, but he's so funny because he's been entrusted with all this wisdom, and they passed on wisdom from hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years. And he's just an academic. And whenever he gets into a conflict situation or a gotta make a human choice, gotta act situation, he stutters. He's like, it's a, whether it's a bomb, it's a girl, it's a, yet at the very end, well, towards the end, he, he risks his life and breaks the law to join the party to save the world. And I just think it's cool to see how he gets courage, that he's trying to pass off his job to younger men, and he realizes that he needs to do the job. So I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think you make a great point about the flamboyancy of the characters. You know, the Chris Tucker character is someone who could have easily just been a joke, right? He
Yeah,
could have easily just been a huge joke. And even though he remains flamboyant throughout the whole movie, when you start to humanize him, they have these little moments where they humanize him, and it's not like he's sad or something. It's just they just make him more tangible or real. And I think that's a great point about some of these characters that are each very different from one another. You know, one of the things that I have to remember as I'm writing and as I work through when I do some developmental editing and coaching with other authors, fiction authors, sometimes they have too many characters because you don't need 5 characters that all do the same thing. Like you need, you don't have 5 Fifth Elements Lilu, right? You don't have 5 Corbin Burnsons. You don't have 5. I forget the Chris Tucker guy's name, but you don't have. Yeah, you don't have 5 of those. You don't have 5. I mean, but the only reason you have two of the priests is because he's passing it down to one. Like that, the young guy serves kind of a different purpose, and so all of those things um, kind of matter, especially you've got an hour and a half or 2 hours within a movie. You've got to keep that stuff. And what's great about great characters is when you throw them together and have them do a common goal. Another great character, one of my favorites, was the opera singer lady, and
the diva.
so distinct. She's such a
Yes,
distinct character, and you don't really hear a lot from her, but she's fully realized almost, even with very little dialogue. So I think she's great.
he is awesome. I love when I caught this time when she communicates with one of her staff to go send a message to Lilu, and she just exhales, and you hear her exhale, but you don't hear words or even anything more than breath. But then the assistant goes and passes a message on to Lilu, and it's just beautiful how they describe that communication. And you find out what she said, but I don't know. I just thought that was pretty cool. I love the opposite character.
Yeah.
Um, it was one of my favorite lines also in the movie is when they, the bad guys, the muscle, ask for somebody to negotiate. And Corbin's next to the guy who is inherited, because the other guy died, the job of being in charge of the ship that they're on. And it's like, have you ever negotiated? And the guy's terrified. He goes, would you like me to maybe try to negotiate? And um, and actually they set this up by Corbin saying to the ship steward, we need to find out who the leader is. Mangalores won't fight without a leader.
Hmm.
And then they call for a negotiator. Goes, that's the leader. Would you like me to try this? And the guy's like, yes. And he just kind of whips in. No, he gets announced, we're sending someone in to negotiate. He walks in, shoots the leader in the head, and says, anybody else want to negotiate? And he saves the day.
Yeah.
So it's a great setup. So I
No,
just
yeah,
love
it's and again, the like you said, it holds up. So there are a lot of the effects that aren't digital. So this was before the real huge influx of, Star Wars. The first three episodes were like almost all of it was digital, and you could kind of tell here and there. And there's some of the overabundance of some of the digital effects, which were cool at the time, but you're seeing a lot of the filmmakers now go back to some of these practical effects because it's more natural. It's more grounded in reality. It's better for the actors, and so you still have a lot of that. So it's good. The effects are still good and believable, and they're not cheesy, but they're also kind of grounded in a reality, and I think that helps a lot of the characters. They're all sort of flawed in a sense. I know Lilu is perfect, but she's also not perfect. I mean, she doesn't know everything. She's a fish out of water, so to speak. That sort of character, and so they all have their flaws and they have their needs and they have ways that they need to help one another, and that's great writing. Going back to the writing, but great characters that's what great writing is, in my opinion. Great writing is coming up with those sort of characters and then the arcs that all make sense, that lead you to, we won't go over what the sort of climax of the movie is, but it does bring a lot of that back from the first scene. Wasn't that where the guy from 90210's in the, Luke Perry or something's in the
Jerry,
beginning?
yes.
It brings us, brings you back all the way back to kind of some of the setup, and gives you a full sort of cycle of what's going on. So yeah, no, I think I totally agree. I think if people who haven't seen it, it almost got a bad rap with some people. I seem to remember back in the day, some people just kind of didn't like it. I don't even know what it has on Rotten Tomatoes, but I definitely think it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it and kind of notice some of these things. So, any more thoughts on Fifth Element?
The tri-fails.
Okay, go ahead.
Tri-fails, and it was more than three. It was usually three failures before they would succeed.
Right.
And I just thought that setup of trying, and there are consequences if you fail, trying and failing,
Yeah.
and trying and failing. And they would actually underscore it with the president of the planet would say, oh, we're saved, we're lost. We're saved, we're lost. And it was just funny how they would show different reactions, and they did a great job of cutting from one POV and scene to another to underscore what was going on. The matches was the figuring out how to use the elements was a beautiful setup of tri-fails. Even Corbin Dallas trying to win Lilu. I mean, she's unconscious and he kisses her and he gets a very, very clear message, not without my permission. And but he tried, and then in the end, he does succeed in getting the girl. So it's fun to watch the tri-fails. There are three, I think, tri-fails to get him on the mission. And they show this. I love the juxtaposition of we're very clearly far in the future with lots of advanced technology, but people aren't all living the dream. It's not all bright and shiny.
Good.
Uh, he's in a rundown apartment, and his cab, there's still cabbies, is run down. And this little boat, like a Chinese, I forgot what you call them, this boat, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
comes, it's a vendor, it's a ramen kind of vendor, and he comes up, and so they have that familiar old world character of the wise old guy saying, "Oh, bad news never comes in threes, so third time will be good." And he gets three pieces of bad news after the guy convinces him to open his mail. But then the fourth bit is, you've won a trip. So I love how they used the classic try-fail sequence, but it never seems forced. He used classic tropes, but in a way that seemed believable and natural, and it actually didn't make us groan and, "Ugh, I can't believe he's doing that." But it was like, just,
Hmm.
I can't believe he did that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, one thing about the Corbin character is, you talked about it, the beginning, the setup, where the introduction to him. There's so much information that we're given in those first minute or couple minutes of introducing Corbin that just as I was thinking about it when you were talking, he has this background in the military, and so but we're not told exactly why. But we don't have to know why. If you think about it, just the question, why would he be a person of competence in the military and leave? Why would that happen? That we don't even need to know why. Just the question, we can imagine something would have happened, or he was disillusioned. And so now he's in this kind of dead end life, but he'd rather be there than in whatever he was before. So there's some background there where he wanted a purpose, where he wanted to help people, where he wanted to use his skills for good, all that sort of stuff. But again, we can imagine a lot of that and get sort of hints of that along the way, so that we know he's competent and we know he's a good action, cool dude, and all of those sort of, things that the movie wants us to know, but without having to spend a whole lot of time on spelling it out for us, and so I just think those are some key things as we look at characters. You don't have to spell it out necessarily for the audience. Just give us those hints that, oh, you know what? Why is he like this now?
And they do tell us in the movie, they state it very clearly, but it's not an info dump. It's dialogue. Why me? Well, the general says, "Well, you're the most highly decorated member of your unit, and you're also the only one that's alive." And
Right.
it's another reason I can't remember, but one, two, three. He gives the 3 points of that are important to know about him as a military person, but it's in dialogue. So
Right.
the general isn't telling Corbin anything he doesn't know, but he's using that as an argument to convince him as
Exactly.
the best candidate.
Yeah, it's not an info dump. It's like it's part of natural conversation. Well,
Yes,
this is
that's
why
the
we picked you.
writers.
This is why we picked you.
Yeah,
And that's also just for when you're looking at dialogue and you're looking at setting up character. It we would not like Corbin if Corbin got up and said, "You know why I'm awesome?"
yes,
Like you want him to have this sort of nonchalant attitude while other people tell him, "Well, you used to be cool," or whatever. And that's so sometimes having other characters notice the good thing about a character is way more effective than trying to just tell us outright that this is an amazingly cool guy. And those are some different ways to show it. So, well, I'm with you. I think that The Fifth Element, I always liked it. I liked it when it came out. I think I own a copy of it. I'm pretty sure on DVD somewhere. So no, I dig it. Now, well, let's transition as we kind of wrap up here. So give everybody a little pitch, a little blurb on Water's Edge, right? Did I get it
Okay,
right? Water's
water's
Break.
break.
I was gonna say break, but then I was like, no. On Water's Break, give everybody a little blurb, a little pitch.
Here, I'll grab a
Ooh,
copy.
yeah, grab a copy.
Ooh, isn't that pretty? So that's Water's Break. And Water's Break is about Nika, the main character, lives with her people. She's an amphibian, and her planet is water covered, and they live in communion. It's almost an Eden like existence. Their needs are cared for, they have great communication, and they all have places in society. It's not perfect, but it's good. And then her planet is invaded and terraformed, but they don't know that this is by intelligent intent. They just know that they have this disaster where the heavens rain fire and stone, and the waters are broken. The surface has massive mounts that are placed in the water, and they separate the waters for the first time. And by separating the waters, they also separate the amphibian people who live in there. In the wake of this disaster, her father is horribly injured. Her sister goes missing, and they can't find her anywhere. And her mother slips into a state of deep depression because her husband's um, deathly death has a mortal injury in it, and her daughter's been missing. And so Nika resolves to find her sister, whatever it takes. Turns out that takes her leaving the water, going onto the surface. And as soon as she does that, worse things happen. You think having your world bombed and terraformed while you live in it is bad? There are worse things that can happen, apparently, or in my imagination. Um, I like to say hilarity ensues, but suffering ensues.
Nice. All
I
right,
think it's,
so go ahead.
uh, I was just going to say, when I was watching Fifth Element, I realized that one thing that influenced me was somehow subconsciously was Lilu's character, because Lilu plays the fish out of water. She's completely out of her element, and she's forced to adapt. Now, Lilu is the supreme being and the fifth element and the savior of the universe. My character, Ika, is not so lucky, but she is literally a fish out of water when she's taken captive and forced to try to survive above water, is what they call it.
Mm.
And she's forced to learn new ways to adapt, to communicate, to interact with others. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like that character. And I
Mm.
like how you character categorize it for me. Fish out of water. That's pretty much perfect.
Well, that's one of the tropes of storytelling, right? Is that's one of the ways that we learn about a world is we put a character in the world who doesn't know anything about the world and they have to figure it out. That's just one of the things you do. It's got to make sense though. I mean, you can't just, do it, but that's one of those. It's ET and certain things like, and it can go both ways, right? You can put a fish out of water in our world and it reveals to us things about our world that we may not realize and think about, and makes us look at it all anew and stuff. So yeah, it's actually a great device if you use it right. Just like anything, if you do it right, it's great. So people can get it on Amazon. Would you prefer that's where they go?
They can go anywhere they want. If you go to watersbreak.com, WATERSBREAK.com. And that's my book launcher site. And that has all the information of the places you can buy it, if you prefer Amazon or Books A Million or Christian Book or wherever you want to buy it,
Cool.
wherever books are sold.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll put that website in the description so people can go there. Or like most people, they might just Google it or look it up on Amazon, wherever they go, wherever books are sold.
I want to do a plug though. I
Okay.
have started listening to the audiobook version. I realized I could order it the night before it launched. And the narration is blowing me away. She's making me fall in love with my story all over again. I mean,
Nice.
I'm noticing stuff that I wish I could have changed, but Jordan is doing a beautiful job, and I'm so thankful to Enclave and to Oasis Audio because they have just given me stellar support for my little story.
Thanks. That's great. Yeah, definitely check that out. Well, Sophia, this is awesome. And thank you for being on here. And I just encourage everybody to go to the website and remember to look up the book and remember to like and follow and share this channel. Obviously,
Awesome.
I've got some new stuff coming up. I'm going to be doing some more original stories I'm going to put on here, and just trying to do some different things as we get into the new year. So, peace out, everybody, and thanks again, Sophia.